promise given to King David by Nathan, as recorded in the book of 2 Samuel, is a promise that intertwines royalty with eternity, a lineage with a legacy, and an earthly throne with a heavenly one. King David, the shepherd turned warrior turned sovereign, settled in his cedar palace while the ark of God dwelt within tent claws. His heart, a complex tapestry of triumph and trial, was stirred by a divine unrest. How could he, the appointed king, reside in such splendor when the symbol of God's presence on earth lay within a transient shelter? With the prophet Nathan at his side, David voiced his intent: to build a house for the ark, a dwelling befitting the Most High. Nathan perceived the sincerity in David's eyes, and he encouraged him, "Go, do all that is in your heart, for the Lord is with you." Yet that very night, the word of the Lord came to Nathan, a divine directive that would not only halt David's plans, but unfold a promise that was far greater than timber and stone. The next day, under the weight of the revelation, Nathan returned to David, the king, expectant, awaiting counsel, perhaps to discuss timber from Lebanon or stone from the quarries. However, Nathan spoke not of construction, but of covenant. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, Nathan began, his voice steady with the gravity of the Lord's words, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, one of your own sons, and I will establish his kingdom. David listened. The warrior within him quieted. The sovereign within him stilled. A son, a successor. This he understood, but Nathan continued. His words painted the future with divine brushstrokes. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. Forever. The word echoed through the chamber, resonating in David's soul. Not a house of cedar and stone, but a dynasty unending, a kingdom eternal. David, humbled, found himself at the threshold of mystery. Far beyond his reign, this was no longer about the might of his rule, but the perpetuity of God's purpose. In the silence that followed as Nathan's prophecy hung in the air, David's thoughts turned inward. A king accustomed to the clamor of battlefields and courts now grappled with the silence profound and full. What could he offer in return for such a promise? What temple could be constructed that would house such a boundless covenant? Later, David would go before the Lord, offering not the first stone of a grand edifice, but the foundational prayer of a grateful heart. Who am I, sovereign Lord, and what is my family that you have brought me this far? It was a prayer of humility, of wonder, of a man who saw his place in the tapestry of divine narrative that would span the ages. And so in the quiet aftermath of Nathan's visitation, as the sun dipped below the horizon of Jerusalem, David sat in the gathering dusk, not as a king planning a monument, but as a servant marveling at the unfathomable depths of God's faithfulness. For the promise was clear. David's house, his kingdom, his throne would endure, not by the strength of his own hand, but by the unwavering word of the Lord. So in this season of Advent, we're invited to prepare our hearts to make room amidst the clamor of our lives for the coming of an eternal King. How then shall we live in light of this enduring promise? Here are 3 practices that we can embody during this season to honor the promise to David and prepare for the coming of Christ. We can build a house of worship. Just as David desired to build a physical house for God's name, let us build a spiritual house within each of us. dedicating time each day to worship, allowing our praise and adoration to be the bricks and the mortar of the temple fit for a king. Secondly, we can seek righteous rule. The kingdom of Christ is marked by justice and righteousness. In this Advent season, let's pursue these virtues in actions and in relationships, advocating for fairness and dignity for all, striving to reflect in our communities the just rule of the coming King. And finally, we can cultivate an enduring faith. David's faith in God's promise spanned his lifetime. Let us too nurture a faith that endures through the seasons of waiting and times of uncertainty, a faith that holds fast to the assurance of Christ's eternal kingdom. So may the promise of God's everlasting kingdom fill you with peace this Advent season, and may your heart be a cradle for the coming Christ.